Photography Daily is a Loading Zone production.
I had the dream job. I thought that what I worked for and sweat for and bled for was going to be this perfect existence. It was going to get me up in the morning and make me inspired, but it wasn't.
It's justified. I can spend my money on this because it's justified because I'm learning about photography.
There's no way I could go on that trip over there and not take a camera with me.
I found having a little focus on, taking a photo, it just makes me happy, even if it's what you call a somethings and nothings.
Some of the voices that you'll hear today, including Chris Burkhardt, who I'll tell you more about in a moment. Ooh, bit of oil needed there. I've come today to a place where I was drawn in to this walk, to this location, by a simple road sign that pointed me toward Hackney Bottom. In the name of eccentric place names, I thought, that's the place for me. Let me get a picture. I seem to be, I don't know whether I'm next to a military establishment, but there's lots of barbed wire and a keep out sign, and probably right now a camera watching me walk along the perimeter fence, microphone in hand, taking pictures. This could cause trouble. Hang on a second. Let me get an image of the pathway. This, ladies and gentlemen, is Hackney Bottom. Thank you, Neil. All right, this is going to sound so old school BBC that I feel I should be wearing a dinner jacket and bow tie to say the words I'm about to. A bit of backstory for you so you understand what I'm about to say. There used to be a BBC show in the days we only had three TV channels. 3, Neil? 3? You only had 3? God, how old are you? Yeah, I know, 3. Well, there was a 4th, wasn't there? There was a 4th button that temptingly sat next to. There was BBC One. Not even sure it was labelled BBC One, but for the sake of demonstration, BBC One, BBC Two, ITV One, and then ITV Two. There was an ITV Two button, wasn't there? Temptingly sat just to the right. Well, there was on our telly, and that was the 4th, the fabled 4th button. And you always felt that, you pressed it one day, there'd be a 4th television channel there. But there never was. There was just snow. And I don't mean Jon Snow or any other snow that you can think of. It was just interference snow. Yes, there was this show called Points of View. Well, there still is, but the old school version is the one I'm talking about. And it was a letters feedback show. And it featured a presenter that would start all the letters with the words, "I am indebted to Mrs. Barnsley of Shipley Gardens for writing to me about the 9 o'clock news." I mean, it was essentially a passive-aggressive complaint show where Mrs. Barnsley and Mr. Barnsley probably had lots to say on everything from the coal miners' strikes to what Percy Thrower got wrong, teaching you how to grow thimbleweed on Gardener's World. You might have to look some of those up. But the presenter always started by thanking the writer for either correcting him from the previous week's show or writing him with a whinge or a complaint. One of our real treasures of comedy, sadly no longer with us, she said in an almost prophetic way, I suppose now, Victoria Wood, that when the Russians feel strongly about an issue, they form a bloody revolution. The British write a strongly worded letter to Points of View. Neil, avoid the temptation to follow up on the former part of the sentence. Yes, I will. I shall skip briskly on. But the presenter would follow a complaint by always being overly charming. So let me try. I am indebted to Mr. Jan Erik Mostrom of Strogert Street in Denmarkland for correcting me and reminding me of the word I was trying to recall in last week's show that described the freedom to roam in Sweden. It's, here's the word. I'll just say the word for you without my black and white BBC attempt of sort of Pathé News kind of voice. The word I was trying to think of last week that Jan has reminded me of is allemansratten. I hope I've got that right. I reckon Mrs. Barnsley is already putting pen to paper for my Swedish pronunciation. But allemansratten, I think you have to, it's a r, and then 10 sort of fires out the end of the word. But this word, Allemansrätten, since I've learned it now. It gives Swedish people this right to explore, to go where you want, in essence. If you want to head into the woods with your camera, you just do it. There's no sign saying, keep out, this is my grass. So last week when I was trying to, do you remember I was trying to get that picture of Mally's tree in the field just behind barbed wire with a big "Get Off My Land" sign on a post? In Sweden, that just would not have been a problem. There is the caveat that as long as you're wised up and you respect people and you respect where you walk, but apart from that, you're good to go. Because, for photographers, this would be a fantastic law, wouldn't it? For you and I, we'd love it, because so many places are just wired off, and often, well, with some exceptions, I can't really see why. Maybe it dates back to times, certainly in this country, when the gentry would shout, "Pop another peasant on the fire, would you?" out of his third-floor arrow slit in his castle. This is what makes Swedish people in particular so close to nature, so wonderfully in touch with it, part of it, proud of it, and I suppose ultimately respectful of it. And if photo walking has taught me one thing with my camera, apart from this, well, the fact that you need to eat one Garibaldi every 2 miles, it's this. It is the absolute wonder of exploration. One word, Neil, yes. That dalliance with nature, an inquisition with the most magical but basic beauty, which for me is it's a track leading to who knows where. I think I'd enjoy Swedenland very, very much indeed. For me, it's just raising your camera to experience life. That's the beauty of this thing. And somebody who spends a lot of time exploring nature is my guest today, American photographer, adventurer, public speaker, Chris Burkhardt. And that's not too tenuous a connection, as he's spent some time in, well, this part of the world being Scandinavia, not the UK. Norway in particular, actually, in a place just inside, just sneaking inside the Arctic Circle, because Norway is that vast, or that long anyway. Finding his freedom to roam, his landscape work is just beautiful. But it's his work as a surf photographer and his adventures in inhospitable places that we're going to talk about today. Mrs. Barnsley, if you're listening, get that wetsuit out and a good camera housing. We're off to Flamborough Head.
Today on the Photowalk.
In those environments, you do become more mindful. You become more aware. You're more aware of your surroundings when they can kill you. You're more aware of, the image when you have a limited time frame to make it happen, to make it work.
Stories of life told by photographers, and today those stories come from Chris Burkhardt, Mandy Burton, John Mayer, Katie Docking, and you. It's a unique, special kind of photography podcast made from and by the letters that you send in, the thoughts you have, and words from our special inspirational guests. Whatever you photograph with, be it a large plate camera with bellows and wonderful wooden heritage tripod or a smartphone, this isn't a show that'll make you feel a little lost if you don't know the history of art or still can't work out the inverse square law of light. It's about how we feel when we make pictures, what it does for us and what it does for others. And in that 6.6 billion people on this planet can make a picture with something, there's a lot of us about to walk with on our photo walk today. In the mailbag then, a seaside visit after a while out of making pictures, the tonic that is nature and the landscape, and the extreme healing photography brought one of our contributors on life support. Alcoholic Garibaldis, strange finds in Wales. There's a lot of Welsh stuff in today's show, by the way. An introduction to a new feature about the stranger corners of Insta, and falling in love with photography again, but this time with your kids. So, shall we walk then? Checklist out. Coffee and Garibaldis packed? Check. Boots on and laced? Check. Walking trousers or shorts? Check. Spare batteries? Check. Film or cards? Check. Earbuds in? Check. Lens caps off? Let's walk. Summer is definitely just around the corner. because we're on a flight path today. It's just plane after plane after helicopter after plane after micro thingy after, it's never ending. If it was like a film set where the director was hopping up and down madly saying, stop, cut, let the plane go over, we'd be here till tea time, a week Thursday. I'm very grateful to, the summer. Yes, I can tell the summer's coming because some of the paths I'm walking along now, they're almost, I almost can't get through the nettles. And it's, I'm not sure. This week I was supposed to bring Sabarkalot. I know, disappointment abounds. He is not here. And I'll explain why a little bit later on perhaps. But I'm not sure he'd appreciate, because there's only 1 foot off the floor. All these nettles. I'm very grateful to mpb.com, a company that so generously show their faith and support in this project of ours, these walks we make together, making what I'm going to call from today our photographic imprint. So thank you, mpb.com. The people to use when it comes to buying and selling and trading used camera kit online in the UK and the US and Europe. And I'm proud to say they're a part of our story here because they help photographers like me and like you to tell our stories. And because you're trading used, with sustainability being very important to the mix, you'll also be a part of the circular economy. Safe place to trade and sell, guarantees too upon what you buy, and product specialists who are photographers. I've been there, I've been to their warehouses. You know we did an MPB special there, and their product specialists are photographers, are creatives, are creators. And they've been answering the questions that you've been sending in. And today's question is from Mrs. Barnsley in Shipley. No, it's not. It's Gary Cunningham who asked, there are so many tripods available, but can you suggest something that would fold down, quite small, not too heavy, and won't collapse at the slightest bit of wind on a hillside? Sounds the perfect tripod to me. And from MPB, the answer came, there are a few that match what you ask for, but the most popular is going to be the Manfrotto B3 range. Even within this range, there are a number of options with different materials and head types. Importantly, though, they're all sturdy. So send your questions, your emails to studio@photographydaily.show. Sell the kit you're not using, trade it in for the kit that you need to create. Buy used, spend less, and get more at mpb.com. Actually, I've been doing a little bit of work with the three-legged thing tripod. Isn't that the best name for a tripod? Well, yes, Neil, obviously, because it's not going to be 4 legs. All right, don't be like that. But we might be having a sort of slow down tripods at the Ready Week one week, and that'll be. We've not really done a review. We're not really one of those YouTube review type channels, are we? I know we're a podcast, but you get what I mean. But I think I've got a few things to say about the 3-legged tripod because I've started to use it, and it is buckled to the bottom of a bag, but in a kind of makeshift way, which I'll explain when we do that as well. Anyway, Helen, for the first letter today, Helen, at least one of the shots that you made on your photo walk, well, that must have been tripoded. So letters, 2 to start. First one is from Helen Fennell. What amazing black and whites you've sent in. They will be on the show page today. The famous show page is linked to within the Player app, or you can just go directly to photographydaily.show, look for today's episode, and that is the show page. Last weekend, says Helen, the delightful Mr. F and I went to Barry Island. I've not been very well over the last few months, and this was the first time I'd really felt up to a proper day out. So the plus side of Barry Island is that as well as being chock full of photographic opportunities, it also has lots of benches. Our photo walk was more of a sort of a photo walk stroke photo sit down, but we had fun and fish and chips and ice cream. That is my version of fun. But no baldies. Oh, surely you took the baldies. I took my Fuji X100V, set to monochrome to keep life simple. My favourite shot of the day is of the 3 boys on the fairground ride. It's not quite in focus, but I love the expressions. What do they say about focus? It's a bourgeois concept, which you should not be allowed to say unless you can spell the word. It's a bit like Kaylee. Can anybody spell Kaylee around here? Go on, you spell Kaylee. No. You've not even got the first few letters in the right order. Helen says, I've started to re-listen to some Photography Daily episodes to try and distill some of the wisdom within them. I'm aiming to become a little more disciplined in what I do in the hope it improves my photography. Sending best wishes. Helen, the pictures are fantastic. And do you know what I really love? I love the simplicity of some of them, the small but nevertheless significant details, like the surf suit that's hanging up next to the beach huts. Very appropriate for today. And that chap walking around in his winter woolly, you're not about to say to me that's Mr. F, are you? Still determined to eat an ice cream. I'm by the sea. I'm eating an ice cream. I don't care. It's cold. And a quick mail from Robert Squire as well. Robert, thank you. Hello, Neil. Just listened to last Friday's Photowalk episode featuring former Buzzcocks punk rocker, now photographer John Mayer. And I want to thank you for the treatment that you gave my letter. Well, we should have some backstory here as well, shouldn't we? Rob sent in a photo, a music gig photo featuring a band called A Silent Film. And it came with a story about the experience and ended up with him sharing one of life's great lessons told to him by somebody he met on the night, which ended with the words, "As long as you're able to do it as much as you can." I think that's wonderful advice for almost everything in life, isn't it? I can almost hear Mrs. Barnsley writing in now. I must complain. Do it as much as you can. Buzzcocks, by the way, massive band, very important to the British punk scene. And as we revealed on the actual show, featuring John, who's now this superb photographer, their first big gig was only supporting the Sex Pistols. I mean, what a way to start. Anyway, says Robert, it's the first time my wife has joined me in listening to photography, a photography-related podcast. I believe she found it a bit confusing, but I enjoy your parentheticals, which is a very grown-up word. The sort of word you would only hear Mrs. Barnsley use on a show called Points of View. On the subject, though, of John Mayer and Buzzcocks, says our Robert, about a year after the silent film gig that I went to, Buzzcocks played the same venue, Union Transfer in Philadelphia. I don't know if John was with them on that tour, and I've had no luck finding out the whole 5 minutes of Googling I've done. But this show I attended with my son, who was 19 then. At the time, I was aware of how fortunate I am to be able to share experiences like this with him. And now, 8 years later, it's all the more true. No long story for the show, but here are a couple of photos of the event. Steve Diggle giving us a taste of punk showmanship. Great, cracking photo. Oh, full of energy. And the late, great and inimitable Pete Shelley. I can't overstate the joy that his unlovely but entirely lovable voice brings when belting out love songs. All the best from Rob Squire. Thank you, Rob. I can help you, by the way, that John wouldn't have been there on that night. But by the magic of podcasting, here he is now. A few words on that episode of Photography Daily that you were listening to. Here he is talking about the Olympus trip. Remember the Olympus trip that he bought when he visited New York for the first time with Buzzcocks. His first experience of photography, way before swapping the drumsticks for a lens full time.
I suppose a lot of people have an interest in photography. I mean, going back to that bunch of pictures from 79, I mean, that's relatively recently that I unearthed the original 35mm negs of those and rescanned them, and that's what I posted on. So that's what you'll have seen. But yeah, that was my first ever camera, my own camera. I bought that Olympus trip specifically because we were going to America, and at the time, I was sort of getting interested in cinema. You would go and see things like Mean Streets and Taxi Driver, All the President's Men, so I was but also the stuff on TV. Myself and my dad would sit there watching episodes of Kojak, and so this imagery of America, it's very strange. It's like the first time you go there, it's so exciting, and you get the cab into the centre of New York, and it's just like you're just looking out the windows, and you've never been there before, but it looks familiar just because you've seen so much of it before. So I just felt there's no way I could go on that trip over there and not take a camera with me. So I got the cheapest and most basic point and shoot camera.
50 quid, wasn't it?
It was about that, yeah.
John Mayer from episode 288, punk rock star to photographer. It's a real joy to talk to John. I'm fascinated by people's change of careers, and of course going from being one of a punk rock star to photographer. I mean that had my interest written all over it, if there's such an expression. Now, I know we talk a lot about being wary of grass always being greener, that the photo story is on our doorstep. Boy, did the pandemic, I suppose, teach us that. I don't know what it was like in all the countries where our friends listen to this show. I have a pretty good idea of many of them because of the letters received. But my experience in the UK was straight up odd. We would take our allowed exercise along the canal side, which was completely devoid of barges. That was really weird. Just as our family, and you do that sort of dance when you met somebody along the path, I'll just go over here, throw myself against a hedge or a fence or something. And everybody looked away from each other. And sometimes you breathed in, you breathed in as you approached people, and then you walked about, 10 minutes after, then breathed out again. But of course, that was at a time where there were hardly any treatments, where the vaccine was a distant dream. So in terms of photography, doorstep was all we had, really, wasn't it? Or in the home was all we had. But being able to travel again, to be able to go to different parts of the country, the world even, is so special. And my next letter from Drew Brown is all about that connection with adventure. And the pictures on the show page, drink those scenes in. Hello, Neil. I recently found Photography Daily. Where have I been? I know, Drew. I was thinking the same. I was thinking, Drew Brown, where is he? Here I am every week talking into my iPhone, and he's absent from the party. Still, you found us now, so that's okay. I have to say, says Drew, it's superb and right up my street. I returned to photography a few years ago at age 55, and it's absolutely changed my life and the way that I view the wonderful landscapes around us. I've always had an interest in photography, from playing with my dad's Kodak box brownie as a toddler, after Daddy said check there wasn't any film loaded, beginning an apprenticeship as a darkroom camera operator in reprographics, and saving up to purchase a Praktica MT-L3 SLR film camera, along with lenses, filters, tripod, etc., only to have them all stolen. Drew, I don't want sad stories. We can't start our friendship with sad stories. Just an aside, by the way, but Drew has made me think of a great project. Not a particularly new idea, but very, very possible you could end up with a sort of pictures the office photocopier gets to see at the Christmas party. But I wonder if you were to leave a film camera in somewhere like a huge office block or a shopping centre, or insert better idea here, it being filmed without anybody being able to see what was really being produced by this box. I wonder if that could make a great project in itself. Maybe an art gallery. I don't know. Yes, an art gallery would probably be better. Somewhere where people would respect the kit enough not to nick it. Neil, you've not really thought this through. That's the problem with ideas on the fly. But I think that might make an interesting project. Anyway, back to Drew. After my kit was stolen, I started playing sport at weekends, and so photography took a back seat. I still had compact cameras, but mainly shot snaps on holidays. With our wonderful children now having flown the nest, I promised myself that I would revisit photography. So when Father Christmas brought me a Sony mirrorless camera a few years ago, I was really excited to discover the so-called rules of the hobby. I previously got no idea about thirds and leading lines and so on. I watched endless YouTube vlogs to pick up tips, and so began the adventure of this fabulous hobby. I've discovered so many fantastic locations that I didn't know existed, from temperature inversions in the Peak District to wonderful waterfalls in Wales. Photography has added a real purpose to my regular walking. Isn't that fantastic? That's what this is about. And it's about sharing it, isn't it? You get these pictures home and you want to show people. And I don't mean that kind of sit down, I'm going to show you 300 pictures from my holiday in Ibiza way. I just mean when you've sorted out something that really, touched you there, on your heart, that you thought, fantastic, that you want to share that experience. Getting out and about in nature and the landscape, says Drew, has been an absolute tonic, and I'm constantly on the lookout for compositions, even when travelling without a camera. When the buggers properly hit. It's not just hit or bit, if you like, but sort of holding onto your leg, I suppose, in the kind of way Sir Barkalot has started doing now, unnervingly, I might add. When you start making compositions or seeing pictures, minus the camera in your hand, Drew, that's when you know it's got you. Discovering your podcast, and this is very kind of you, has been a joyful experience in this hobby that we all love. I had looked for a podcast for like-minded photographers who totally get it, the joy of being out in the landscape and capturing the experience, and this is just what I was looking for. The photos I've sent are from one of my photo trips further afield. This is the fantastic, and I hope I'm saying this correctly, Ogwyn Valley in Snowdonia land. I hope you like the pictures. Like the pictures? You kidding? If it weren't for the fact I'm otherwise booked to go shoot weddings and I've got to take our Jack to football this weekend, I'll be packing up my imaginary camper and heading out tomorrow. Just you and me, a brace of cameras. Bring Sir Barkalot, he'd like it as well. Packet of Garibaldis, 2 flasks. One for me with coffee, and the other one for Sir Barkalot with Yorkshire Gold. He's more of a tea drinker, is Sir Barkalot. So yeah, Drew, thank you for your pictures. They are on the show page today. The most phenomenal views. And yes, Sir Barkalot, since I mentioned him a moment ago, he was supposed to be with me today, but, and it's a big but, I'm heading back via a meeting today, which is all very grown up with a design agency. Like proper adult stuff, that, isn't it? It's on a farm, but the people I'm meeting, they have a big, big dog who's very grumpy, and Sir Barkalot apparently would be eaten as an hors d'oeuvre. So I thought, let's leave Sir Barkalot at home today. Well, you know, he's with Wendy, the dog walker. She loves him. Anyway, time for part 1 of our guest. And here is a guest who I would imagine is not a huge fan of meetings either. And I say that only because if you study his work, if you follow his portfolio, if you really spend some time, I mean, it's probably a 4 Garibaldis and 2 coffees job, this one. If you spend some time on his website, Chris Burkhardt, you will understand, is 3 words. Well, at least for me, living the dream. Living the dream insofar as photographically he gets to do and go to the most incredibly beautiful places to make pictures. But that does bring a trade-off. If you want to find the most incredible vistas where you don't find people walking into frame just at the moment you least expect or want them, then and if you want to surf and make pictures, well, you've got to go slightly further afield. Chris is an accomplished explorer, a photographer, creative director, speaker, and author. His passport is completely stamped, I'm sure. And to quote the website, though it is true actually in his work in philosophy, Chris Burkhardt works to capture stories that inspire humans to consider their relationship with nature while promoting the preservation of wild places everywhere. And well, if you want to hear this as a kind of 4D experience today, you need to take your podcast player and go and stand under a cold shower. Turn that tap all the way round to cold, not halfway, all the way round. If you're walking right now, don't be disrobing and throwing yourself in the cold water. It's a family show. But part 1 of our 2 parts today. Here's Chris Burkhardt. I promise you a journey of inspiration. In the UK, we have a new programme that's hit our telly screens recently, Chris, with a self-proclaimed, I think it's self-proclaimed, Iceman. An adventurer of the... And I can see you smiling. Others don't have that same advantage, I know. But Wim Hof, who I know you know. And it's where I'm going to start our conversation. Your TED Talk, The Joy of Surfing in Ice Cold Water, has the introduction, anything that's worth pursuing is going to require us to suffer just a little bit, says surf photographer Chris Burkhardt, and he explains his obsession with cold, choppy, most isolated beaches on Earth, which I thought, I'm sure that Chris and Wim would get on like I'm going to say house on fire, but that's completely the wrong temperature. You've found the prize cold has to offer, haven't you? You
know, oddly enough, there was a point in my life and in my career where I set my sights on, it wasn't so much the cold, but it was what that brought to my images. It's what it brought to my experience. It's what it brought to me personally and spiritually and everything else you could say. And I think that what I found was that in those environments where you have to give more of oneself, where you have to struggle a little more and you have to work harder, the images, the stories, they became more ingrained in your DNA, in who you are. They became a part of you. They became more significant. And I think that there's something to be said for that, where you have to struggle a little bit to work, or you have to work a little harder to create something special. And I just think that that's my modus operandi. That's my MO, my way of operation. I want to create stories where I'm involved either personally or behind the scenes, but I'm giving a piece of myself, because I know that those are the ones that really translate to real and genuine experiences. And I think that's just what I've sought out in my life. And more and more, it's what I appreciate, I guess, these days more than anything else. So.
Well, that pain seems to, you've said it's a shortcut to mindfulness. And that fascinates me. Because I think we're all after, I say we're all after, I think it's become something that we're more aware of as creatives, this mindfulness and this process of photography being able to deliver that.
I absolutely think so. It's funny because my whole, you mentioned the TED Talk, so I'll jump into that, but my whole, shtick was basically like, if suffering is a shortcut to mindfulness, then I would consider myself a monk, because I think that I've tried to thrust myself into a lot of situations where that is the case. And I know that might seem like a masochistic approach, but it's really not. It's not about masochism at all. It's about finding that understanding that in those environments, you do become more mindful. You become more aware. You're more aware of your surroundings when they can kill you. You're more aware of, the image when you have a limited time frame to make it happen, to make it work. There's a lot more that becomes top of mind when you're thrust into the here and now. And I can't think of a better thing to thrust you into the here and now than harsh and inclement weather or a hostile environment. And I don't mean hostile like it's trying to harm you, but I just mean hostile like when the moments are good, they're so good. And in that moment that they last just a very, very little amount of time. And that's special to me.
But actually, surf is quite a hostile environment anyway. Never mind being in sub-zero temperatures. Where I think you said the wind chill from memory, was it -10 or something? When you stuck your head above the water, it sounded quite cold to me.
It can get that way.
Yeah.
It can get to the point where every little moment you're spending becomes, you're just a little more cognizant of what's going on, and then at the same time, there are moments where you're like, holy cow, this just went from being so casual, so fun, so beautiful to all of a sudden being very much a scary and a situation where maybe you don't feel ready for it. And that's a good lesson too. Like that's a part of photography, I think, for me is it should feel slightly overwhelming at times. It should feel like you're in over your head. I mean, that's where growth occurs to me.
I'm interested where the surfing and where the photography started, what chicken and egg, what came first, and how the surfing arrived in your life and then became this conduit for these amazing photographic adventures.
It's funny. I've never considered myself like a surfer. I just grew up by the ocean. So to me, it was more about growing up at the sea and having a relationship with the ocean. At times it was a babysitter, at times it was my friend. I still find great healing and appreciation for the ocean because I just know that when I'm there, when I'm around it, I feel like the best version of myself and it feels like home. It doesn't matter which ocean I'm in. There's something about that. Now, I don't, want to put my finger on what that is, but I think that my whole early life growing up, the ocean was this constant, thing. It was a reminder of what I loved and what I cared about. And as I transitioned to shooting and photographing surfing, it became even more important. It became important to my creative process and it was my first canvas. So I've had this relationship with it. What I love about it, which is I think what you mentioned, is that you are limited by its personality. It's wind, it's tide, it's swells. There's so many things that become sort of variables when you're shooting surfing, unlike other action sports or landscapes. For me, it was all about infusing the landscape into this image with the athlete there or with the subject there. So I think that I would venture to say that surfing is one of the hardest things to shoot because there's so many variables. And that taught me a lot of patience and it taught me a lot of appreciation. and so on.
I think the point you make about the ocean's really precious as well. I spoke to a photographer probably about 18 months ago who found that being by the ocean had helped him in the loss of his father in particular, and that had been his constant in life. And I think that's what being next to the ocean can be.
You nailed it. I mean, it's a funny way to think about it, but I think I also find a lot of comfort there. And I know that some people don't because they are scared of the ocean, and I respect that. I understand that. But for me, my experience has always been that the ocean has provided great healing.
Yeah.
And kind of in some weird way, the fact that you look out and what you see is just an endless abyss, an endless kind of nothingness, no horizon, no land, nothing. It's like that's where the world kind of ends. And I think that there's a simplicity, and there's also like a great realization that we are insignificant in this landscape, that there is a force right there at your doorstep that could just literally overtake you and end your existence, right? Like I don't know how else to put it, but it's kind of a calming experience to know that like you are just gifted this opportunity to be here, just to stand on dry land and to witness such beauty. To me, that is important.
I'm going to be careful that this doesn't become a conversation about a TED Talk, and anybody listening knows that I do love a TED Talk or eight. But I set out seeking adventure, but what I was finding was only routine. They are words from the TED Talk. Initially, when I looked at your work, there was, Chris, there was a deep sense of did I miss the boat? What have I been doing with my life when there was all this adventure to be had? But it seemed you found the glamour wasn't all that you'd hoped for. And I wonder why that was.
Well, I think what it was that when I was trying to write my TED Talk, for example, and I was trying to also just put into words what it was that I loved about this transition I was going through as a creative. I was trying to find ways to relate it to everybody, because the thing is that the world, according to Chris Burkhardt, is not a very relatable world. I know that I exist and I operate in a way that many people don't, but there are those that are stuck in a desk job. There are those that are stuck in their day-to-day grind, their day-to-day routine that maybe at times could relate to what I was going through, which was that I thought I had the dream job. I thought that what I worked for and sweat for and bled for was going to be this perfect existence. It was going to get me up in the morning and make me inspired, but it wasn't. I was working as a surf photographer for magazines, traveling around the world, arguably for some, the dream job. But for me, it wasn't inspiring growth. It wasn't inspiring what I wanted. So the whole point of that talk was that even the most glamorous of opportunities can become mundane. And I wanted to fight against the mundane. I wanted to inspire people to think about the fact that if what you're choosing to do day to day in your career isn't creating growth, that it isn't making you question your existence, your place in the world, all these things, then maybe it's worth exploring something else. Because that's what I did. And it took me giving up the greatest dream of my childhood to realize that. And I think that there's something to be said for that. Absolutely.
How do you think of yourself then? Are you an athlete? Are you an adventurer? Are you a photographer? Are you? I mean, with all the things that you do, it must be very difficult. Perhaps not something you want to do to actually pigeonhole yourself or give yourself a title.
So this is a great question. I think that for me, what I've realized was that I don't want to be a photographer. I don't want to be an athlete. I don't want to be any of those things. I choose to explore different avenues of storytelling. Those are the things that fill me up. Yeah. And those are the things that provide me a set of knives that then allow me to create beautiful sushi, or it provides me a set of skills where I can then tell a variety of stories. How boring would it be if you went to your barista and all they could make you was a cappuccino? Right? I don't want to be that. I want to be somebody who can provide you an onslaught of ways to share an experience. Sometimes that means me being in the situation where I am an athlete. Sometimes that means me being in the director's chair. Sometimes that means me picking up a camera. That being said, I think that that's what I dream of, is having a variety of ways in which I can share an authentic experience.
Talking of sharing, you have to turn up to work every day to build a following, to build a brand, and yours, Chris, has steadily grown. Whilst you are no doubt a skilled lensman in the icy waters, you're a skilled navigator in the social media sea too, aren't you?
I mean, it's funny because this is a topic that gets asked or brought up a lot too. Like, how do you find success in social media? I think that it's a good reminder that social media is just a glorified texting app. It's a glorified communication platform. And so when you spend the time to connect with people and you get to know those people and you care about those people, you'll find success. That's just all there is to it. You know, no other trick or tip or anything is ever going to compensate for simply just engaging with people. And I think that that's a big part of it, right? And I aim to connect with people in a variety of ways. Social media is one of them, but doing books and films and in-person events, that's like at the core of what I love most.
Yeah. Harsh environments don't have to be in the ice, of course. I love the film you made called The Road to Inspiration, which I'll link to on the website, in which you emulate a famous picture by somebody called Ansel Adams. It was the one of him in his van in the mountains, which is why you built out your own van, wasn't it, really? But tell me about that adventure. Yeah,
it was simple. I think that I'm always looking to tell a story in any way that I can. And with this one, it was like, well, I was building out a van, basically. I've since sold that van during COVID, but I owned it for years, and I built out this epic like little adventure mobile, and I wanted something I could take my kids on road trips and et cetera, et cetera. But the point of it was basically to go and showcase how and why we emulate our heroes, and how an image, a single photograph can inspire somebody to do something, right? That was sort of the story that I wanted to tell. It wasn't really about like, hey, this is, my van build, blah, blah. It was more about, okay, there's this element of my DNA that has been affected by this person and their image. And so much so that it inspired 1,000 road trips, and it made me want to create a vehicle, much like Ansel had, to go out and document these places. So I think that there was some similarities there, but also just like showcasing how much of an effect a photograph can have on us, and even an old photograph, right? That's one of the coolest parts of it for me.
Grandpa was a traveler though, wasn't he? Your grandpa?
Yeah, exactly. And so I didn't grow up with a dad in my life. And so for me, my grandpa was like, took that place and, toured me all over the Sierra and all over the Western US. And so I owe him a lot. I owe him a lot to that experience and to shaping the person that I am. And at the same time, nowadays, I'm trying to carry the torch to my kids, And so I think that there's something to be said for those people in your life that show you the way, even if you're just in the back of the van complaining and you don't want to go. And it's funny because as a kid, I was a pain in the ass, right? But I also know that those early childhood experiences, they left such a deep impression that they shaped who I am now, despite if I was, like not appreciating it in the moment, right? That's kind of the funniest thing, right? Is oftentimes we don't. Oftentimes we never appreciate what somebody is trying to share with us or do for us in that moment. But then years later, all of a sudden we kind of come full circle. And that's kind of what this story was about, coming full circle.
Chris Burkard returns soon for the second part of his story. And if you would like to send in your stories, I would be delighted to hear from you. Always looking for them. And of course, they are what drives this spirit of this program. How you feel about photography, what you've been doing, what it means to you, things that you've heard that perhaps have sparked an interest or perhaps reignited some thoughts about photography, then send them please to the email address, which is studio@photographydaily.show, studio@photographydaily.show. If you'd like to send in some pictures, then that's great too. Not all letters arrive with pictures. It's wonderful when you do share where you're walking, where in the world. That fascinates me, it really does. Send them in to me on that at that email address, but send them 2,000 pixels wide, please, if you possibly can. And if you're sending them as smartphone images, best quality. Remember, best quality. Try not to, don't size them down, because then they all pull apart and we can't see the fruits of your labour behind that lens, no matter what kind of camera, what kind of picture-making box is in your hand. Like many independent podcasters around the world, and this wonderful planet of ours, we have a Patreon page where some very special friends help support this show for the price of a cup of high street coffee or a roll of HP5 black and white film a month. Our Patreon friends, they help support the time that it takes to make and sustain these shows, which take around 3 production days a week. So for those who do support it with a few pennies and pounds, cents and dollars and euros, or mounting goats per month, a sincere and heartfelt, glowing thank you for your faith in building this, not just as a resource, but also as I really do mean this, as a channel of friendship, as that's what I'm personally trying to evolve with the content, particularly on our Photowalk edition. So thank you. And to say thank you to our patrons, I make an additional short-ish, because sometimes it's not so short, diary-styled show each week, which you can only hear on the private Patreon webpage, or the wonderful app that you can download and log into on your smartphone, which is it really is just like another podcast player, very easy to use. I really like the interface, actually. And our programmes, I'm just being dive-bombed. No, don't do that. Let me finish this link, please, Mr. Bumblebee. Thank you, all the same. Am I somewhere too close to your nest or something? That's the second one in the last few minutes. So yes, to thank you, we have our show called More, a little oasis of extra audio and features. Plus we meet each month on Zoom where we share stories and pictures, some of which you'll see on the website in the picture post tab. And from next week, show news, Patreon news. There's the start of the new In Conversation archive series, where select interviews and stories from the last 2 years are being remixed slightly, so you have just the interview. And we're starting with Nick Brandt from last November, one of photography's great environmental champions, showing how deeply our fates are, quote now, intertwined, portraying people and animals together, causing us to reflect on the real-life consequences of climate change. I saw Nick's work at Photo London. Photo London's coming up soon, isn't it? Neil, haven't you put it in your diary? No, I should have done, shouldn't I? Are you going? Oh, okay. So I saw his show at Photo London. Those incredibly powerful pictures of how we are impacting the environment and the world. Oh, truly amazing. There are 100 plus extra shows now, more shows, and there'll be many more to come when we start the archive series. And bits and bobs to listen to or read. Your local coffee shop, maybe one latte down per month, but you're helping to build a wonderful, safe place for us to talk and spend time together. And I love you to meet our patrons. So this week, let me introduce you to Katie Docking, who is going to be on the More Show tomorrow with the 5 things that she loves about photography. But let me play just one of them for you. And I think it makes sense to start at the start. This is the first thing that she loves about photography, and she does have quite the story. This is Katie Docking.
So first thing that I love about photography would be that it's given me a sense of achievement when I felt I couldn't really achieve much. So a bit of background is that I've had a double lung transplant. So in that time, I had like 6 liters of oxygen every time I needed to move. So I'd be attached to wires. I was in hospital a lot. And I found that photography, even though I was ill, I could still do it. I might not have been able to do it in all of the ways I wanted. So, doing a business, I wouldn't have been able to sort of work with people a lot because I'm very breathless and stuff. But it's stuff like taking a picture of light. It just looks really nice for the sake of it, just because, that makes you feel good. And when I got ill quite quickly. I've got cystic fibrosis, so my lungs were not great anyway. But then I got ill pretty much overnight and needed to go on the transplant list. And it meant that I had to give up my job. And, I was about 29 when that happened. It should be the prime of your life. And I was reduced to not even being able to go out on my own because I had these heavy oxygen bottles and being in hospital all the time. So being able to just basically have a little project little photography projects and, using that just to record daily life. It might have been what crochet I was working on or my dog. It kept me going, when actually I could have felt really devastated, obviously. And it wasn't that I didn't, but I found having a little focus on, taking a photo, it just makes me happy, even if it's what you call a somethings and nothings. It might not matter to anyone else, but I really love stuff like that. And it did matter to me, and that made me feel good in that moment, that when, everything else was going fairly wrong, I suppose I could control that, and it was good.
Katie Docking, and she'll be appearing on the Moore Show tomorrow. Look at this majestic white horse. Hello, darling. Hello. Now, if I was in the same field, I'd feel a bit, come here, I'd feel a bit nervous. I'm not great around horses, as I've said before, but you are gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. And you know it. Posing. Let me get a picture. Hold on. You are no doubt posing for this. Look, you're even closing your eyes a little bit and then opening them again. Or is that my voice? Here we go. Shutter speed 1600 f4, 160th. You are lovely. Come and say hello so I can get the noise from you. No? Oh, I don't think so. It's, I'm a bit tired. And just taking it a bit easy. Walk on if you wouldn't mind. All right then. I've got a picture of you anyway. So I don't forget to mention it. If you do want to join our Patreons and become a supporter, then it's very easy to do so. You just go to the website photographydaily.show, look for the orange button, top right-hand corner, saying support us. I think it says support us. Did it say support us? I don't know. You should know, Neil. You wrote it. It's clear anyway. And just click on there, and it'll explain all about what you need to do. And thank you in advance if you do join. Remember last week I mentioned the alcoholic Garibaldi. Well, Peter Gazer sent me Rebecca Pepler's New York Times recipe. See, there was me thinking it was simply my favourite Photowalk snack, and all the time it's been a cocktail that you'd be able to order in fancy bars. Dedicated, of course, to Giuseppe Garibaldi, the revolutionary who created the Kingdom of Italy. Well, helped at any rate. When he wasn't downing his own cocktails and eating dead fly biscuits, that is. Hi, Neil, says Peter. Is this what you've been talking about these past few years, when you say Garibaldi's check at the start of the show with your checklist? You've been rumbled. I hope you don't have many listeners who also read the New York Times food section. Well, no, it's not that, Peter. Though I've got to say, when I read Peter had to send me the recipe because I couldn't open it on the website itself. But Campari, orange bitters, dash of orange, a wince of grapefruit, flaky sea salt in a shaker with ice. Whoa, what's not to like? Sounds perfect for a summer's day. Also, and I told you we had a fair few letters about the Garibaldi Photowalk snack that I take with me on these walks. When I say a fair few, it must have been what? There was a kind of a flurry of them. Half a dozen or so. Neil, says Michael Priest, is that an Italian 180-metre long aircraft carrier in your camera bag, or are you just pleased to see... Oh, Michael, please, this is a family show. Now, I'm truly confused, says Michael. When you say Garibaldi's packed, I always thought you meant the flagship of the Italian Navy, Italy's aircraft carrier named after Giuseppe Garibaldi, the grandfather of a nation. Anyway, just a note to say, enjoying the photo walk. I actually tried to make my walk with the show, and now it's spring in the evening with my 10-year-old German Shepherd, Stanley. There's a good name, a good solid name for a German Shepherd, who sadly, but kind of fortunately, is a little slower these days and a bit more patient with me as I choose to stop and take pictures of leaves along a path. I'm sure that he humours me. Hold on, let me just open this gate. Public right of way. Oh, bravo. There's been rather too many don't go here signs today, which kind of supports what we were talking about right at the start. This is nice. Where am I? Somewhere called Bottom, Neil, I think you said. Yes, I'm trying to retrace my my steps back to our car. So there we go. Peter, Michael and Stanley, the Garibaldi I refer to, won't make me slurry-eyed. And if I threw it into the local canal waterway I walk along, it wouldn't create a wave large enough to take all the geese with it. It is just a humble biscuit with raisins, which look like dead flies. And here's another gate to open. Is it necessary we have this many gates? There we go. You're an inventive lot, you lot are. Inventive lot, you lot. And, well, that's true of the Facebook group as well. Graham Harries, thank you very much for the posts in the Facebook group that we have, which is a wonderful, and I like to think, safe place to hang out, to talk about this thing that we love. Nobody point scoring in this particular one. And if they do, we throw them hard Paddington Bear stares. That's what we do. Graham Harries posted, I was listening to one of the recent podcasts, and Neil, you mentioned that it would be good to see what projects people were working on. I've been working on a long-term project for around 15 years now called Lost Wales. The project documents the heritage and life of Wales that's been abandoned and is slowly being reclaimed by nature. From little farm cottages to huge mansions to mines and various forms of transport, I've found all sorts of things hidden in plain sight. The project's become rather addictive, with many a night spent looking at old maps to see what was and might still be there. Here is one from the lovely old Welsh chapels that you'll find if you walk Wales with your eyes open. If you're not a member of the Facebook group, then do yourself a favour for this project alone. I will leave a link to Graham's Insta that houses the project on the show notes today. But go and see all the pictures that he posted on the Facebook group as well. Fantastic. We should have a chat about that some stage, Graham, I think. I've got to say, there are some how, what, where pictures on there. There were a few, what? How? What? What's that doing there? Like the old aircraft. 36 million quid's worth of military jets of old, including, by the looks of it, a Harrier jump jet that it looks like both these aircraft look like they're just sort of washed up in the middle of a Welsh field with a river and mountains in the background, just sat there. I mean, it doesn't look like it used to be it doesn't look at all like it used to be an old airbase or anything. They're just in the middle of Welsh countryside, looking like they're entirely lost. Maybe the jump jet was looking for the Garibaldi aircraft carrier. I don't know. And then our Emily Renier raised a really good point that I thought I must share with you. A good point about street shooting. Let me read Emily's post. Does shooting street photography help anybody else with their paid work? That's the question she asked. Here is the outcome of my time in Shoreditch in London yesterday. And just so you can imagine it, though again, visit the Facebook page to see it. It's of a woman striding purposefully out from the shadows into the light, set against what looked like to me, they could be Victorian glazed bricks of a railway underpass. That's what it looks like to me. Emily says, I do find going out to shoot street regularly, almost weekly when I can, really helps me with my paid family and my wedding documentary work at the weekend. And this, I suppose, for anybody who earns pounds, shilling, cents, dollars and goats per square inch for their work is really important. Making time to make your own pictures. This is something I didn't appreciate until, really, it's the fault of you, this is. It's you did this. You and I going out for our photo walks. That really has made a real difference to me in all kinds of ways. Emily says, I don't know about anyone else here, but there are times during a wedding day when I just don't feel it. Like my eyes have been turned off. Does anybody else have this? Can't see anything particularly interesting, and frames just don't jump out, particularly during the drinks after the ceremony and before the food. I become a bit lazy. So I guess I find going out into London like training my eye for those lazy parts of the wedding day, where moments don't necessarily get handed on a plate. And that's good. That's that feels to me like Emily exercising that creative thing. Not exorcising, but exercising, and really working on on seeing, which sounds odd, I know, but there are times, I'll admit, there are times during a wedding day when it's slowed down a lot, where people are drinking cups of tea and you're thinking, what shall I photograph now? And this is what Emily's talking about. Sometimes I go on Oxford Street or Trafalgar Square in the hustle and bustle of it all to find the weird and the wonderful detail of human life, but often I like the quieter parts of London, where strangers in the distance is all my eyes get drawn to. Yesterday, I found a bridge, the bridge I've just described, with a beautiful pocket of afternoon winter light, and stayed under it for a while, which plays really, I think, into the assignment that Giles set earlier this week on Monday on the assignment show. Stand, watch, observe, and 15 minutes later, take just one frame. And there are, by the way, some extraordinary pictures and thoughts coming in for that. Now, Emily has an Instagram for her street work, which is separate from her main Insta account that she uses for her photography business. And it did get me thinking, Neil, careful, you'll get a nosebleed, about the side accounts that some of us have. I'll link to Emily's account that she has for her street work on the show page. But this feature I've been thinking of doing, and I mentioned it last week, didn't I? Instagram is not the enemy. Or, I don't know, my guilty secret account, although that sounds a little bit dodge. I mean, I have my strange bathrooms of the world one. Maybe we'll talk about that another time. I've got, various. There's a couple sitting on the side there that I have fun with, and that's what I thought maybe this feature could be about. So a short series of features about I think one of the advantages, one of the pluses of Instagram and being able to, I suppose, experiment with a project. Instagram is a great place to go and place a project, because you can add to it whenever you feel like it. You don't have to make a big song and dance about it. It sits there as you work on it, and it's fun just to build and watch it grow. I'm not so yes, that's what I'd like to do a feature on. I'm not necessarily looking for pet ones, though I know I do love them, and I get it. And Barkalot, so Barkalot has his own. There are a few Barkalots on there, so you have to search out the proper one. Unless there's some other kind of backstory behind them, of course. I'm looking for the Insta eccentricities, such as this. Now, this is Mandy Burton, who is going to feature next week on the show, who's always had a fascination for, standby, action figure dolls, or action doll figures. What way is that round? I guess you call them that, don't you? So she's taken it one step further, and she's created Joseph, who is on Instagram, who now has a storyline running with some of his friends, and a modest following that includes people who send their pictures in to Joseph, who is an action doll figure doll action. Mandy said they send him, well, not quite marriage proposals, but getting close to it. And she said modelling agencies even have been in touch to say how they liked her work. And this all starts from an action figure 30 centimetres high during lockdown, when the pandemic shutdown happened. So here's a little of next week's chat as we start a mini sub-series of features about the not so secret Instas that we keep.
Like, I would quite like a Han Solo and a Chewbacca, but they go for like £1,000 a piece.
What?
Yeah, seriously. I mean, I think I paid about £65 for Joseph.
Right.
And I've done a couple of repairs on him, because I bought him originally so I could take photographs during lockdown, because I enjoy portraits of dogs, as you know, and people, but it was like having something in lockdown, and the only things I had in the house, I had a couple of old action men, one from the 70s, one from the 80s, but they're very plasticky, and I wanted something that would just, with little LED lights, I use little Lumi Muse and stuff, that I could light like I would a portrait. And I'm learning, and I thought, well, it's justified. I can spend my money on this because it's justified, because I'm learning about photography.
That's Mandy Burton. I'll link to Joseph, it's called, on the show page, so you can ready yourself for what we talk about next week. And I was thinking, stop doing that, Neil. That's twice in 1 week. Literally a thought on the fly with this one. I think we'll call this feature Instagram's Curiosity Shop. Yes, that's the name. a little nod to a Dickens novel, which is a tad dark, actually. The story behind it, anyway. But all the same, far better, I think, than Guilty Secrets and Not the Enemy. Much more positive. Hold on. Another gate. Ooh. Another gate. Yes. This one's on the way back to car. Right, the assignment show. Thank you so much for the amazing pictures that you've been sending, not just on Monday directly after the assignment show. Look, another gate, really. You'll think I'm making these up soon. I'm not. Here we go. Another one. Oh, a quieter one. Someone's been out with the oil on that one. The assignment show. The whole point of the assignment show is to give you a challenge, and really it doesn't have to be taken up on the day of the show itself. If you take up the assignment a week later, no problem. And I think we're probably going to come back and look at previous assignments from 2, sometimes 3 weeks ago on the Photowalk show and talk about them. So whenever you pick up the assignment, look, let's have an arrangement between us, shall we? That when you pick that assignment up, whatever day you do it on, whatever week, whenever you pick it up, and I know some people go back in time, well, you might even be back in time. This is weird. You might even be back in time now, in which case the assignment starts today for the next 7 days, the moment you press that play button on the assignment show. And the one just gone by, episode 295, was set by my friend Giles Penfound. He's a very strong documentary photographer. He's invested his life in documentary photography. He hasn't always, there's been years where he's come away from it a little bit, but he's always drawn back to it. It is him. And I have to say that I think the one that he set was, I wasn't expecting it at all. It's very different to the assignments that I've recorded so far, but I love the idea of just stopping, slowing down, looking, just really concentrating and finding the story in front of your eyes. Don't you dare press that shutter button and there was this sort of arbitrary 15-minute, not so much rule, but 15 minutes placed on it, that then you press your shutter button and you make your picture. But just the one, mind, no more, no click, 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 no, none of that, just one frame. So this is a letter or a posting, if you like, from Matt Hoagie Russell, which I want to read to you because Matt sent this in and it's a comment below the picture that he made. And I thought I'd read this to you. If you don't have access to the web easily right now, I know, for example, that the click-through from the player app, it isn't a mountainous number. So it's nice sometimes to read some of the amazing missives, the comments that you leave on the website. This is from Matt, who sent in a picture to go with this wonderful challenge. And you might be saying, well, Neil, describe the picture. I'm not so sure I necessarily need to, as you'll understand as I read this. Listening, says Matt, to this assignment set by Giles, it really resonated with my relationship with photography over the last 30 years or so. Back in the mid-80s, I saved my money, a weekend job at a local high street photo lab in St Albans, and bought my very first camera, the rather wonderful Pentax ME Super. Working at the photo lab at the time meant I didn't really need to get involved in the developing side of things, and I could get film at cost. I took hundreds of photos of the local area, friends, as well as creative, for me anyway, abstract photographs, light, shadow, reflection. I'm not sure what happened to that ME Super, but I think I traded it in for a compact 35mm camera that was more practical for my interests in the 90s of skiing and climbing and hiking. An SLR and several lenses by then being what they are now. For Christmas 2000, though, I was given my first digital camera, a Kodak DC 4800, I'm not sure if I'm saying the numbers in the right way there, compact camera that was perfect for family photography and was used to take many pictures of my daughter, Natasha, who was born September 2001. And 20 years or so later, I've moved up from Kodak through several... hang on. Another, guess what? Gate, Neil? Yes, gate. There we go. Yeah. Perfect. Yes, 20 years or so later, I've moved up from the Kodak through several Fuji bridge cameras and finally a DX Nikon DSLR with a selection of lenses and have a hard drive where tens of thousands of photos now reside, including more of the abstract light, shadow, reflection, etc. that caught my eye. But now, my 18-year-old daughter asked if she could have an analog camera for Christmas. And I thought, so this is Christmas 2019 gone, and I thought it would be a great idea to get her a Pentax ME Super, as I had that at her age. I found one on eBay at the right price from a dealer, so was confident that despite being like me, almost an antique, it would, like me, still be in reasonable working order. Needless to say, she was thrilled with the camera, and I was thrilled that it worked. And we spent the next couple of months, while she was preparing for A-levels, getting to know the camera and how to use it. The excitement of finishing a roll of film and sending it off, the anticipation of its return, the joy and sometimes the disappointment of looking at and recalling the experience of taking the photos. Then, of course, March 2020. The world somewhat changed. Natasha did not have A-levels, and I was furloughed. And for many, it was a very difficult time. I was fortunate that I had my family, my garden, and my health. During the early part of furlough, as well as spending many hours in the veg patch in the wonderful weather we were having, there was also an opportunity to, sort out all the boxes of stuff that I've been carting about from house to home. Included were most, if not all, the photos and negatives from my early photographic years. Flicking through the albums brought back many memories of people and places long forgotten. And I realised that I'd not really looked at the digital photos that I'd taken over the last 20 years. Looking at the many tens of thousands of photos I'd taken digitally, I realised the disparity between the sheer quantity compared to the few hundred analogue photos that I'd taken back in the day. But it was then that I realised that, the way I look at digital photos had completely changed from the way I'd taken the analogue photos. Having spent time with my daughter Natasha, getting to know the ME Super again, I decided that it was time to get myself one too. And so I did. Another Pentax ME Super. And now I've fallen back in love with photography once more. Now, the letter, as I'm going to call it, does go a little further, but I think those last few words about falling back in love with photography are a good chapter close. And a chance, I suppose, to open the next chapter. Neil, seamless. Segues. It's like a masterclass in them. The second part of my conversation with my guest today, Chris Burkhardt. And in this part, we're going to talk about, inspirations and about the logistics of having family with all this exploring going on in your life. We talk about criticism. We talk about, I tell you what, shh, Neil, stop. Pull up a tree trunk, pour a coffee, chomble on a Garibaldi. Let's listen to Chris Burkhardt, part 2.
I don't like to ask as a first question. It would always be at the start of a second part. And so here we are with all that you've done, Chris, the exploring, the incredible places we've talked about in the world that your camera's taken you. Who has or did inspire you? I assume following your film about him, Ansel Adams would have to be in that list. Yeah,
I would say that Michael Fatale was a big inspiration to me. He's a large format landscape photographer from the Southwest.
Yep.
I was really inspired by people's work that I could see myself shooting because I was a product of the West. I didn't, go on planes and go, around the world. So when I would see people who photographed the places that I could relate to and understand, I was like, this is the type of work I want to make. This is what got me excited. So I think if anything, that was the thing that really drew me to them. Was my world was only as large as 20 hours from where I lived. So I was very much inspired by them. But nowadays, having traveled the world a bit more, having seen more of it, I'm very inspired by Ragnar Axelsson. He's a photographer from Iceland. Really talented guy and just somebody who I've gotten to know personally and really care for deeply and love. And his stories, his kind of his kind of approach to showcasing sort of civilizations or groups of people that are now, suffering massive, almost extinction in some ways, or their way of life is suffering extinction. I really applaud his work, his dedication. It's really amazing. But there's endless people that inspire me. We don't go through a list of them, but I think that it's more a matter to me of like, nowadays I'm very much inspired by the people who I can see myself and or understand their approach. Like, why are they doing what they're doing? Well, they were inspired by this, or they were inspired by that. And that goes a long way for me.
Your landscape work, Chris, is simply stunning. But does it bring the same adrenaline rush? And I'm probably wrong in saying, well, I think Chris Burkhardt obviously has to be an adrenaline junkie all the time, because that's not true, is it?
No, I mean, adrenaline is a funny word and a funny thing, because I think that it's all about risk, and it's all about risk management. What might get my heart pumping nowadays is so much different than what got my heart pumping 20 years ago, and also too, there might be someone who's just so eager to go and approach a random subject and shoot their portrait. And to me, that's terrifying. But when I'm in a landscape, or when I'm working with people I know or athletes I know, I definitely feel safe at times pushing the envelope. But I guess, the one thing I'd consider, and the one thing I realize, is that what feels like pushing the envelope to me is very much different than what it felt like 10 years ago, or what it might feel like to somebody else. So I think that there is something to be said for that, right? And just understanding the fact that these things, they come with time. We have to give ourselves over to an experience or a person or a landscape, which is why I dedicate so much time to train, or so much time to learn about the craft that I want to, because if I'm going to be, documenting, this thing, I want to be able to be proficient at that. So yeah, I think that it's not so much about, it's more about the learning process of where it takes you to understand that thing to the point where all of a sudden, when you are shooting photographs, you aren't worried or stressed or again, scared for your life. You have to truly be in a creative state. Yeah. You have to be in a state of, I think, calm and understanding and slightly relaxed in some way. That's my thought.
Well, you mentioned the family. You have a family now, and it occurs to me that finding places with no Wi-Fi, where the local bear are the bosses. But how does that work though? Because your adventures do take you away from your young family, and I know that can be difficult.
Yeah, I mean, for sure can. And I guess what I would say is that the best way to answer that would be to listen to the podcast that my wife and I did on the subject. I would never want to speak on her behalf and say, well, this is what she thinks. And, I've been luckily married since I was 21. It's been almost half of my life now. I got married really young. So my career has evolved. Yeah, getting her thoughts on the subject. Yeah. I was asked this topic so many times that I was like, you know what? I'm going to sit down and do a 2-hour podcast with my wife and get her thoughts on it and see what she thinks and answer some of my own questions and yada, yada, yada. So I did that. It's on my site. It's the only one I've ever done.
Were you surprised of how candid she was?
I mean, my wife definitely is my wife, because she speaks her mind and she has an opinion. And I think that that's what I love and appreciate about her the most. And so, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've had to develop this relationship around what works for her and what works for me, over time. It's taken time and energy and a lot of dedication to that, so I think that is kind of one of the key things. I would also say that, and this is also an answer or a question, right, regarding anybody who wants to start their career at a certain time of life, right? And I'm not going to say when you're older, but I want to say when you're more established. If you're more established as a person in a career, in your life, in your ways of operating, you are going to have a hard time finding a partner who's going to be down or okay with simply like, you coming into their life and trying to make it work together, where there isn't flexibility, where there isn't understanding, right? And it's the same thing with starting a career like this when you are more established. And what I mean by that is that you're going to find that it's hard to go back to learning something new, finding elements or levels of discomfort, or giving over yourself to a creative process that requires so much learning, energy, time, and things like that. Because I think a lot of people will, I'll get a message where it's like, hey, I really want to do what you're doing, but I'm doing this and this is where I am and yada, yada, yada. And I think that for me, the one decision that I made that really was a game changer for me was I recognized early that if I pursued college or a career or something like that, other than photography, I was going to eventually get too comfortable in that position to then give myself over to the amount of suffering it would take to really do this as a craft. And what I mean by that is like, yeah, it's hard. It's hard to learn something new. It's hard to give yourself over to constant criticism, to barely scrape by making money. Why would you do that to yourself if you've gotten comfortable in a job and a career and you can see where your life is going to go, as opposed to giving yourself over to a creative outlet or a career that like has no real definitive concrete answers or ways for you to kind of know you've made it, right? Like I personally don't know now that I've made it. I don't know where my next paycheck is coming from. I'm a freelance photographer. I rely upon being hired for jobs. And so there is risk there. My life and my career is inherently risky, right? The one thing I did to mitigate that risk was find a partner and establish a life with a partner that I knew could support that and I knew wanted the best for me. And that's definitely has benefited me.
Well, you mentioned the F word, freelance. I'm going to mention the C word, COVID, because the two of them aren't exactly great bed partners.
Yeah.
But I do wonder if COVID, if this time that's taken us out of the office, has helped us reconnect with nature.
I would be the worst person to ask because my life and nature have always felt synonymous.
Right.
Especially with my career. I don't think it did when I was a kid. I wasn't that kid that like grew up going backpacking with my dad. Those were things that I had to come to later in life. But over the last 15 years, I've gained this incredible appreciation for what nature can provide in one's life and for me personally. So I feel like I've come to appreciate it on that level. And nowadays it's a synonymous thing. I would consider them one and the same. So looking at the world as a whole and thinking about, where they're at with their relationship with nature because of COVID, it's hard for me to really tell. It's hard for me to say. I don't really know. I would hope that people are realizing the value of these wild, remote environments,
And actually, since you mention environments or environment, you've certainly supported community projects with your photography, which seems to me like a side of your work that's growing in importance.
Nowadays, this day and age, it's as if the world wants you to care about everything that's happening and respond to everything. The Amazon's burning and there's, this is happening here. And the reality is only in the last couple of years have we even been able to take in so much information. That being said, I think it's important to respond to the things that you care about and the things that you love and the things that you feel like you can affect real change. So I've tried to use photography as a way to raise money for numerous causes. And I've been lucky to be really successful at that. And I think that's the way we should all approach it. Like if we can create positive change through what we know and what we're good at, then that's maybe like the most effective way that we can do it. And that's kind of what I try to seek out in my personal life. And yeah, it's made a big difference for me. It's made me realize like that the world can really appreciate art on this level. And then it can be a tool to enrich the lives of others.
What have you learned as an artist making a living from the kind of photography that I'm sure a lot of photographers dream of?
Man, I've realized that anything worth pursuing is going to require some level of suffering. Yeah. And so we can't be afraid to give ourselves over to something that is going to inherently require risk and have a bit of mystery, and maybe we don't have the outcome, because that's where the richness, the essence of life really comes from, I think, is going through something challenging and coming out on the other side more learned, more intelligent, more in tune with ourselves and with our experience. And only through that process have I found that I can help not only myself, but other people. And I just so happen to be able to do that through photography. And I feel like that's been an incredible gift.
Do you think you'll still be doing it as a man twice your age? I mean, you were the one that mentioned the maturity. I wonder how far and how long does the spirit of adventure take you?
I think that it's a lifelong thing. That's really the unique part about it, is that people always love to ask this one topic, which is like, oh man, what are you going to be doing in 10 years? And I always stare a bit blankly, because I think that maybe some people don't realize that I'm doing what I love right now. If I was doing this in 10 years, I'd be a happy man. Like, this is incredible. I get to travel the world. I get to choose the assignments that I get to do. I get to usually pitch brands on the projects that I love and really involve them in these beautiful stories. And yeah, it's at times scary. At times it requires a lot of me. And I just, as long as my body can keep up with my mind, I think that I would be so content being right where I am right now.
And my thanks to Chris Burkard for spending time talking with us on the show today. And do go and see his work. Of course, I will link to it on the show notes, on the show page today. Thank you for your letters. Please keep sending them in. They are, well, it's a genuine privilege to read the words that you send, and the time that you spend writing these letters. I'm truly blessed and privileged that you spend your time doing so. So thank you. And the email address is, as ever, hasn't changed, studio@photographydaily.show, studio@photographydaily.show. And of course, if you're sending pictures in, 2,000 pixels, Neil, we know, on the wide side. Yeah, we got it. Yes, thanks very much. For links to Chris, as I say, and other photographers that you've heard from or about today, Instagrams and the websites that we've mentioned, they'll be on the show page too. Or you can follow the handy link in the podcast player app that may also take you there. I know some apps, the links don't work very well. I'll tell you what's on more tomorrow on the Patreon show in a moment, and we're going to play out with a song by one of my favourite artists, Anthony Lazzaro. It's a song called Sunday Breakfast. It's a kind of it's a sort of light jazz ditty that I think is the perfect companion to the end of our walk together today. So this week's postscript, we have to do that. This is going to be tricky, our PS today, because I've turned to Ansel Adams, because Chris Burkard mentioned him. I thought, we'll go see what Ansel had to say. The great man, the great photographer. He said so many things, actually. 102 at the last count. Such as 12 significant photographs in 1 year is a good crop. So just in case sometimes you feel a bit pressurized, 12, Ansel Adams, 12, good crop. Remember that. Or sometimes I do get to places just when God's ready to have somebody click the shutter. All about, it's a wonderful nod, isn't it, to serendipity. Neil, this is cheating. Are you going to run through all of them? You're supposed to pick one. All right, I'm going to suggest this one as the postscript this week. Ansel Adams said, "When words become unclear, I shall focus with photographs. When images become inadequate, I shall be content with silence." I'll leave that thought percolating with you. And here's our play out from Anthony Lazzaro.
I know that I'm well away from being a perfect guy. I can have a bad temper, make a big fuss and cry. And I know that lately it's been hard. We had a bumpy ride. But if you give me one more chance, I make it effortless. So if you want to come back home, I will be cooking Sunday breakfast for week long. We're gonna go and skate on frozen lakes, spend the morning baking cakes with the glowing of our love. Love has given us wings, and we're supposed to go high. Life got in the way and we forgot to fly. And now I think that we're ready to finally leave the nest. We'll take a little leap of faith and I will do the rest. So if you want to come back home, I will be cooking Sunday breakfast all week long. We're gonna go and skate on frozen lakes, spend the morning baking cakes with the glowing of our love. So if you want to come back home, I will be cooking Sunday breakfast all week long. We're gonna go and skate on frozen lakes, spend the morning baking cakes with the glowing of our love.
Sunday breakfast from Anthony Lazzaro. Fantastic. And that's it for this week. My thanks to Chris Burkard and all our guests, mpb.com, and those who are patrons, which you can join through the link on the website, photographydaily.show. And for those wonderful supporters who are, tomorrow is The More Show. It's your own weekend oasis of a little extra for your kind support. And, tomorrow, Chris Burkard is back. And, of course, he's not afraid of anything. Or is he? He reveals something photographic that scares the wobbles out of him. Katie Docking's 5 Things About Photography She Loves, and a remarkable essay that I received, which is, it's stoic, and it's about how photography is battling, for one writer, the toxicity of this world. It wasn't due to be broadcast. It was sent to me actually privately, initially. But I read it, and read it again, and thought, I'd like to read this to you, and I'll share it with you on More. Next Friday we have 2 guests. We start that series about Instagram's Curiosity Shop with Mandy Burton, and Dr. Grant Scott joins me, the host of the United Nations Photography podcast, to talk about an essay that he had written which asked, is documentary photography obsessed with sad? Music today was from the wonderful artlist.io. Links and further research to what you've heard will be on the show page today, and you'll find a handy link in your podcast player app to that. There are lots of VIPs, very important photographers, who help out with this project by the ideas and letters sent in. And I also want to mention 3 who give particular production support. Neil Ford for understanding the tech that he knows I don't, Emily Renier for your eyes in the Facebook group, and Andrea Gilpin for making sure Instagram is engaging. I look forward to photographing with you, hearing from you, and talking with you next time.
Photography Daily is a Loading Zone production.